Welcome to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, a ministry of hope, spiritual inspiration, personal power guided by Christian love. May the power of God's Holy Spirit fall upon you as you sit back and enjoy today's program. I introduce you now to Pastor Nicholas Hood III.
Today I want to talk about the kiss of Jacob. The kiss of Jacob. I don't know how many of you looking at this program today are familiar with the story of Jacob and Esau, but Jacob and Esau were the children of Isaac and Rebekah, and they're twins. Esau was the elder twin. He was born just a little sooner than his younger brother, Jacob. And although they're twins, they were fraternal twins. They're different. So Esau is said to have been hairy. He had a lot of hair on his body, and he was also reddish. Jacob, I presume, had black hair. It was not red. And the two boys were different in that Esau liked to hunt wild game. Jacob, on the other hand, tended to the vegetation. He was like a farmer. And they got along pretty well. Their dad, Isaac, became older and older. And when Isaac became really old to the point where he thought he was about ready to die, he called his elder son in. You know, and in those days, the blessing was given from the father to the eldest child, the eldest son. And with the eldest son receiving the blessing, then this was a real blessing. It was the majority of whatever the father had. He was transferring the inheritance to the elder son. And as the story goes, in the 29th chapter of Genesis, Isaac calls his son in. He says, "I'm about ready to die. I want you to go out, hunt some wild game. You know what I like." It doesn't tell us exactly what kind of game it was. He says, "But you know what I like." And he said, "I want you to hunt it, kill it with your own hands. I want you to dress it, and I want you to prepare it, and I want you to bring it back to me, and I want to eat that dinner. And then after I eat that dinner, I'm going to lay my hands on you. And when I lay my hands on you, I am going to transfer my inheritance to you." And Esau readies himself. He goes out and gets his instruments of hunting, probably a bow and arrow or a spear or something, and he goes out in search of wild game. Jacob, on the other hand, doesn't even know about this, but his mother, Rebekah, tells him, "You need to hurry up because your father's getting ready to bless your brother with the inheritance." And he says, "Well, what can I do, Mom? I don't, have any animals or whatever." She says, "Take one of the animals from the pen." She said, "Kill it, and I will cook it, and I'll prepare it the way your brother likes to cook that meal. And you will present it to your father. Your father's eyes are dim. He doesn't see very well. He doesn't hear that well. And he won't know the difference." She said, "But I want you to receive the blessing of your father's inheritance." And according, to the 29th, 28th chapter of Genesis, Jacob is uncomfortable with this, but he goes along with his mother's idea. And he says, "But how am I going to make Dad think that I am Esau when my skin on my hands and my arms is smooth? Esau is hairy." And the mother says, "Let's take, some fur off of, an animal, and we'll glue it to you, to your arms and your hands to make you seem like you're hairy." And so he does that, and he walks in to his father, and his father, Isaac, says, "Who is this?" He says, "You're back kind of soon." And Jacob says, "It's me, Esau." He tries to change his voice to sound like his brother. And the father says, "Put out your hands. Let me feel your arm." And the dad feels his arms, and he can feel the hair. He said, "You're hairy like Esau, but your voice sounds like Jacob." And he says, "I don't know about this." And he says, "No, I'm Jacob, and I'm Esau." And so the dad takes the food, he starts eating it, and then he lays his hands on Jacob. And in laying his hands on Jacob, on the head of Jacob, he confers to him verbally the inheritance. He says that basically all that I have is yours, and not only all that I have is yours, but the people of the neighboring people and tribes and other nations, they will bow down to you. And all your family will bow down to you. And right at the point that he gives that blessing to Jacob, Esau walks in. And when Esau walks in, you can read this for yourself, Genesis chapter 29. Esau realizes that the blessing has been given to Jacob. And Esau says to his dad, "But Dad, don't you have enough blessing for me too? Even me, bless me." And, there's a Negro spiritual that says, "Even me, Lord, even me. Let some drops now fall down on me." And that's really built around the Esau pleading with his father to bless him. And at that point, Esau is livid when he realizes that Jacob has stolen the blessing from him. And Esau begins to whisper to the other people that work there in the household that as soon as the dad dies, he's going to kill Jacob. And Jacob, gets this word. His mother tells him, "You got to leave now." And his father and his mother tell him, "Go to your uncle Laban, who is your mother's brother, and when you go there, he has daughters, and maybe you can marry one of them. But, we don't want you to get killed by your brother." And so Jacob leaves. Now, I'm condensing the story. It's a long story. But Jacob leaves, and when he gets to the land of Padan Aram, when he gets there, he sees all these sheep, and he goes to a well. And there at the well, he finds shepherds. And he tells the shepherds, "I'm looking for Laban." And they say, "Well, you see those 3 flocks of sheep over there?" He said, "Yes." They say, "Those 3 flocks of sheep." And I don't know how many sheep are in a flock, but I think it was a lot. They say, "In those 3 flocks of sheep, the one who's leading the sheep is his daughter, Rachel." And he says, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah. And she's going to bring her sheep down here to the well. And what we do is when all the shepherds from all the different families show up with their sheep, then we take off the stone from the well and the sheep all drink together." And so Jacob waits for Rachel to come down. And when she comes down with the sheep, Jacob tells her, "I am your father's nephew." In other words, you are my cousin. My mother and your father are brother and sister. And I've come here from my home. And the Bible says he told her all that had happened. And she is amazed by all of this. Jacob is so moved to see Rachel, who is described as beautiful. The text tells us that he bends down and he doesn't wait for the other shepherds. He moves the rock off of the top of this well so that the sheep can drink. And at that point, the Bible tells us he turns around to Rachel, he weeps, he embraces her, and he kisses her. And what I want to talk about for just a couple minutes is, what does that mean for Jacob to have kissed Rachel? Now, when we think of kissing, from a physical standpoint, lovers kiss, and very often that's the start of an intimate kind of relationship. But in the case of Jacob, I think it's much more. It is physical because he's kissing her. He's probably kissing her on the cheek. He's embracing her. He's crying because he knows that he's made a mess out of his life. I don't know if there's anybody here who's ever made a mess out of your life. Have you ever made a decision that you regretted? But I think in that moment, Jacob is regretting what he did to his brother. He stole his brother's birthright. He cheated his brother out of the inheritance. And now he can't go home. And because he can't go home, by meeting his cousin Rachel, and soon after she introduces him to her father, that lets Jacob know that there's a new lease on his life. He has a new opportunity. He thinks he is messed up so badly that there's no way out. But by meeting young Rachel, that lets him know that maybe he can rebuild his life. And that kiss that Jacob gives to Rachel, in my opinion, is really not just a kiss of love, but it's a kiss of affirmation. The affirmation that God is not through with me yet, that God has given me another chance. God is giving me another opportunity. God is showing me a way out. And I believe somebody looking at this program today needs to hear that word. You may have made a mess out of your life. We got some young men who look at this program every week and they're in prison. One in Kentucky, one in, I think it's Indiana. And one of the things that the prisoner, the inmate needs is the affirmation that God is not through with you yet, that there is an opportunity. There's still more for you to do with your life. And that is good news. And that's what I think is happening with this kiss of Jacob. He's not just being intimate. And, maybe in a week or two, I can talk a little bit more about what happens after Jacob marries Rachel. You can read on in the story, and if you read further, you'll find that it gets very complicated. The dad, Laban, tricks Jacob into marrying not just Rachel, but marrying her sister, Leah. And, he wants to marry Rachel. He thinks he's marrying Rachel, but they get married in the dark, maybe in candlelight. And Leah is wrapped up where only her eyes show, and he gets fooled. And one week I want to preach about that and go through that story, but I encourage you to read the story so you'll be prepared for me when I tell that story to you. But that kiss that that he put on Rachel is really his way of affirming that God is not through with me yet. And it grows into love. They love each other. They live out a life together. When you read in the Bible, perhaps you've heard the story about the 12 tribes of Israel. Well, this is where they start. It starts, Israel is the name that was given to Jacob. Jacob's name first is Jacob, but when, he later on in his life, when he is going back to reconcile with his brother Esau, who hated him, he wrestles with an angel all night long. And when he wrestles with the angel pins him down, touches him in the hip. And from that point on, Jacob is limping for the rest of his life. But he gives him a new name. He says that new name is Israel, for you have striven with God and you've striven with man, and you've prevailed in all of this. And so that's my little story. When we come back from the break, I want to tell you a real life example that I've had in my life about the affirming power of God and how in life sometimes we need something like that kiss of Jacob, the recognition that you've gone as far as you can go. You cannot do anything more, but that God is not through with you yet. And there's somebody, I have to believe there's somebody who needs to hear that word today, that God is not through with you yet. Stick around, because I'm going to tell you a story about how I came into the ministry and how I had something, a real life kiss that reminded me and opened my eyes that God had an affirming care, an affirming promise in my life. Stick around, because I want to share this real story with you. Thank you.
America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it and really get it into their heart. And this, the way Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days, we need it more than ever. And Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
Today I've been talking about Jacob and Esau and how Jacob really stole the inheritance from his brother, his twin brother Esau. He runs away to the land of Padan Aram for safety, really, with his uncle and Laban. And in the process, he meets his cousin, Rachel, who he ends up marrying. And the start of that marriage is he kisses Rachel. And the point I was making in the first half is that that kiss of Jacob is a kiss of affection, but it's also a kiss of affirmation. And what I mean by a kiss of affirmation is I think that was Jacob's way of saying, by seeing Rachel in her beauty with all of her sheep in this strange land, it was an affirmation to him that God was not through with him yet, that God had a greater purpose for Jacob. And part of our faith journey is the affirmations, the affirmation of faith. And in each of our lives, I believe that God affirms God's protection, God's care, God's blessing for each of us. And for Jacob, the kiss that he gives to Rachel is really his way of saying, God is not through with me yet. And I want to share with you a real life story for me. I was ordained in the Christian ministry June 13th, 1976. But before I was ordained into the ministry, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a minister. Matter of fact, I hadn't thought about being a minister. I was a successful R&B musician. I played rhythm and blues. I played the trombone, and I went away to Boston University. My first 2 years of college, I stopped playing in the band in Detroit, played a little with some guys in Boston. But as soon as the first January that I was in Boston, in my first year, I became homesick for the music back in Detroit. And so I brought my trombone back with me to Boston. I began to strengthen myself on the trombone because to play a wind instrument is physical. And I did that for 6 months in Boston. That summer, I returned home and I played with the band. And the band was doing very well. We made about $100 each every time we played. And you think back to 1969, 1970, $100 for 4 hours worth of music was considered pretty good. And so when I went back to school that second year, I took the trombone with me, and I was flying home every 2 to 3 weekends. I would fly home during my second year of college, and I didn't have much money to show for it because all my money went to American Airlines at the time. But I came back to school, but I decided, I said, at the rate I'm going, I'm not going to graduate from school on time. And so I made plans to transfer back to Wayne State University. When I transferred back to Wayne State, my dad, who was a minister of a church, matter of fact, he was the pastor of the church I pastor now. My dad said, Dick, since you're coming back to Detroit, I have a favor. Would you be willing to build a youth ministry for junior high youth? I said, sure. And so I started working with these young people. It went very well. And I grew this group from about 8 children to a little more than 100. And we'd meet every Sunday night and about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was doing that as kind of a counterbalance to the music that I was doing. I was still playing music. I was trying very hard to see if the band couldn't get a recording contract. And it just didn't work. Motown didn't want us. There's another recording company in Detroit called Invictus. They wanted me and the 2 horn players, but they didn't want the rhythm section. And so it was very frustrating for me. But during that process, during my last year of undergrad, so I would have been 20 years of age, I was chaperoning a party for these children one night in the basement of the church, and a fight broke out. And we had children from the public housing projects. We had other children, but they were interspersed with each other. But they fell out fighting. And here I am, 19 years of age. These children are fighting, and I'm the responsible adult at 19. And so I had to break up the fight. And during the fight, one of the boys from my youth group was fighting one of the boys from the public housing projects. And they're squaring off. And I made a classic mistake. I should have stopped the fight right away. But the boy in my group was a big boy, and he was strong. And I thought I'd let him get a couple licks in before I stopped the fight. That was very juvenile on my part. I should have just stopped the fight. But as it turned out, they started wrestling, and the other boy was on top of the boy in my group, and all the other boys had made a circle around these 2 boys fighting, and I'm in the back of the circle. It's like an oblong circle, and I noticed that there's another boy from the projects in front of me, and I saw him pull out a knife. And he pulled out the knife, and one by one, they were passing the knife kind of secretly to get toward the boy who was on top of my boy. And at that point, I said, I'm involved now. I have to get involved with this. So I walked into that circle with the boy from my group on his back, another boy on top of him, and a knife was going around the circle to him. And I said, I can't let my boy get cut. And so I walked in, and I literally picked the boy up off the ground. And I, made the other boy get away. And then it was on. These kids were fighting. They started, and it wasn't my fight. I'm just the responsible adult who let a fight get farther than it should have. And because they were young boys, they were only in junior high, and I was in college. But still, you take 40 or 50 kids who are fighting with you, throwing pop bottles and throwing chairs is a problem. If you look at my head today, John Hill, I don't know if you can see it, but right here I have a scar on my head. And I don't know how I got cut that night, but I was cut. And, when the fight was over, I went by ambulance to the local hospital, and I'm on a gurney, I'm bleeding. And I said, it's a funny thing, I never hurt. And I said to myself, now I am a Christian because I am suffering for the Lord in a way that I didn't choose. And so fast forward, I'm in my last year of college. After this event, I go to the public library to, do my homework at Wayne State University. And as I'm leaving the library to check a book out, the lady who worked for the library was a beautiful young woman. She's a little older than me, but this beautiful woman walks out from behind the book, checkout counter, and she walks over to me and she kisses me on my cheek. And she just smiled. And I'm saying to myself, I'm 19, and I'm saying, whoa, what happened? What did I do to deserve a kiss on the cheek? And I didn't find out till much, much later. She was the older sister of the boy I had picked up off the floor, the boy I protected. And what that lady was doing with her kiss was she was affirming to me that I was all right, that I had done something good, that she was pleased with me, not in a romantic kind of way, but she was affirming to me that what I had done as a youth minister was worthwhile. And, I put all those events together. A little later, I went off to Yale to divinity school, and the rest is history. I'm a minister. But the point that I'm making is that in each of our lives, we need affirmation. We need affirmation that what we're doing is right. We need affirmation that we are on the Lord's path. We need affirmation that God is pleased with us. And in like manner, we need to affirm others. We need to affirm others the worth, the value, the intrinsic value of every individual. And to me, that is part of what it means to be a Christian. So I want to thank you so much for watching this program today. And if it's been of value to you, I want you to affirm this ministry by praying on it, and sending a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, or Nick Hood Ministries, 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan. God bless, God keep you. And I hope I haven't bored you with my storytelling. But you know what? I found that the greatest stories are true. And that what I just told you today is a true story. God bless, God keep you, and remember, I am praying for you. And the point that I'm making is that in everybody's life, at some point, there's a plan B. God is talking to us every step of the way.